Have you ever felt a whisper in the silence? A tremor that stirs the depths of your soul before a question lingers unspoken. Its echo haunting the stillness. What if the questions of Jesus, shrouded in divine mystery, hold the eternal key to unlocking the hidden gates that guard the sanctuary of your faith? In the shadowed abyss of your heart, as you reach for a flicker of light, have you ever sensed his presence probing you? His voice, cutting through the velvet darkness like a blade forged in the heavens. If the one who holds all mysteries within his grasp chooses to ask rather than command, are you brave enough to face the truth he gently lays bare within your spirit? Imagine, Tien, in this very moment, a voice both tender and all-powerful resonating within the chambers of your being. How will you answer me? O seeker of eternal truth. Hearken now, for this is no tale woven by the frail hands of mortals. This is a sacred pilgrimage through the desolate wilderness of your soul, where each question of Jesus ignites a sacred flame to guide your faltering steps toward the divine. A chilling wind sweeps across the barren landscape, carrying the faint, earthy scent of ancient soil blended with the smoky whisper of burning cedar drifting from a distant, unseen fire. You stand upon a rugged hill, the ground beneath your feet rough and unyielding, its texture evoking the calloused hands of a shepherd who has wandered these paths for centuries. Above, the sky stretches into an infinite expanse, a celestial canopy adorned with stars that pulse with an otherworldly glow, each a silent sentinel bearing witness to the timeless questions that have shaped the destiny of humankind. The air grows heavy, charged with a holy presence you cannot see, yet feel deeply, a presence that calls your name not with audible words, but with a question that reverberates through the core of your being. Will you answer this call, or will you shrink back into the enveloping shadows that cling to your spirit? Who are you when the piercing gaze of the Son of God falls upon the hidden chambers of your soul? This journey begins at the fiery crucible, where all true faith is tested and refined. Jesus, the Word made flesh, spoke 37 questions within the sacred scrolls of Scripture. Yet he answered at only 3 by minimum. Why would the one who cradles the secrets of the universe choose to probe rather than decree? The reason lies not in his need for knowledge, but in your need for revelation. These questions are lanterns held aloft before your soul, illuminating not the face you present to the world, but the secret heart you guard from its scrutiny. They are thresholds to eternity, standing open, awaiting your trembling step across their sacred divide. Let us step into the first of these divine inquiries. A question that trembles with the weight of existence itself. Who do you say that I am? Envision the scene, a winding, dust-choked path in Caesarea Philippi, where the air hangs thick with the acrid scent of pagan sacrifices and the chaotic clamor of idols fashioned by human pride. The disciples tread beside Jesus, their sandals stirring clouds of parched earth, their hearts burdened by a world lost to the worship of false gods. The crowds murmur ceaselessly, their voices weaving a tapestry of speculations. Some whisper, "He is John the Baptist, risen again." Others, Elijah returned from the ages, and still others, a prophet sent from the celestial throne. But Jesus halts. The earth seems to pause its turning, the wind falling silent as he turns to his followers, his eyes piercing through the fragile veil of their thoughts like a light-breaking dawn. "Who do people say that I am?" he asks, his voice a steady current flowing beneath the river of time. They reply with the fleeting echoes of the masses, their words quick and shallow, reflecting the opinions of the throng. Yet he shifts the inquiry, and a profound silence settles like a mantle over the scene. "But you," he says, his gaze locking onto the depths of their souls. "Who do you say that I am?" Matthew 16:15. A hush falls like a sacred veil upon the moment. This is no idle curiosity born of a passing whim. This is the question that carves the eternal divide between life and oblivion. Not what others declare with their tongues, not what the synagogue dictates with its laws, not what culture permits with its fleeting trends. Who is Jesus to you? In the solitude of your innermost heart, feel the weight of this sacred encounter. The stars above seem to draw nearer, their radiant light casting intricate shadows that dance across the rugged ground like whispers of the divine. The Cenobant thus, mingled with the faint, lingering trace of smoldering incense from pagan altars, rises to envelop you, grounding you in the gravity of this pivotal choice. Peter steps forward, his voice steady yet quivering with the awe of a revelation born in heaven. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Matthew 16:16. Jesus responds, Blessed are you, Simon son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. Matthew 16:17. But what of you, O seeker of the divine? Who do you proclaim him to be? Is he a wise teacher whose words you ponder in quiet moments? Or the Lord to whom you bow in humble submission? Is he a figure etched in the ancient scrolls of time? Or the king who reigns over every pulse of your heart? Is he a name uttered in solemn ritual? Or the one who walks beside you through the searing trials of your life? Consider this truth: your answer is etched not only in the words you speak, but in the very fabric of your existence. If you declare him Lord, yet rule your own life as sovereign, what truth do you deny in the shadows of your heart? If you call him Savior, yet cling to your own strength, what faith do you profess before the throne of grace? The psalmist declares, the Lord is near to all who call on him. To all who call on him in truth. Psalm 145:18. Does your confession reflect the truth that dwells within your soul? Or is it a mirror of convenience shaped by the world's demands? Imagine standing before him now, in the stillness of this eternal moment, his eyes, brimming with boundless love yet unyielding in their divine clarity. Search the hidden recesses of your spirit. The world fades into a distant murmur, and it is only you and him, face to face across the abyss of time. Who do you say that I am? He asks again, his voice echoing through the hollow chambers of your being. Your heart quickens, your breath catches in your throat. Will you speak as Peter did, with a revelation kindled by the fire of heaven? Or will you falter, ensnared by the doubts that rise like a storm from the clamor of this world? This question is the bedrock upon which your faith is built. It is the boundary that separates the path to everlasting life from the chasm of eternal separation. For Jesus himself proclaimed, whoever acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. Matthew 10:32. Yet acknowledgement is not enough, it must be lived. Your life must sing the same song as your lips. If you name him Lord, do you follow his commands with unwavering heart if you call him Savior? Do you trust his grace to carry you through if you crown him King? Does he truly reign within the throne room of your soul? And search the depths of your spirit. Who is Jesus to you when the storms of life howl with fury? When temptation whispers its seductive lies? When the world demands your allegiance with unrelenting force, who is he? When the crowd disperses and you stand alone before the mirror of your own conscience, for in the end, this question will not be answered with words alone. It will be answered by the legacy of your life, written in the deeds you leave behind. What would it mean to live as if Jesus is truly the Messiah, the Son of the living God? Would you release your fears into his hands, secure in the knowledge that he holds all authority over the heavens and the earth? Would you surrender your earthly ambitions, trusting that his purpose for you surpasses the dreams you chase in the night? Would you walk boldly, proclaiming his name amidst a world that bows before lesser deities carved from stone and gold? The prophet Isaiah echoes through the ages, fear not, for I am with you, be not dismayed, for I am your God. Isaiah 41:10. If you believe with all your heart that he is who he claims to be, why do you still tremble before the fleeting shadows that dance across this mortal plane? This is but the first step upon a path of profound weight. Another question awaits, one that will delve into the depths of your courage. Why are you so afraid? Envision the scene: a frail wooden boat adrift on a tempestuous sea, waves crashing over its sides like the wrath of the deep itself. The disciples, hardened by years upon the water, clutch their oars with trembling hands, their faces etched with the pallor of terror. They have witnessed Jesus heal the broken, cast out demons with a word, feed multitudes with a mere handful of loaves. Yet now, in the grip of this storm, their faith dissolves like sand beneath the relentless tide. And where is Jesus amid this chaos? He rests at the stern, his head pillowed on a cushion, sleeping through the tumult with a peace that defies all understanding. The disciples rouse him, their voices cracking with desperation and fear. "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Mark 4:38. Their cry is more than a plea, it is a challenge, a doubt cast into the wind like a spear. "Do you care for our fate? Are you aware of our peril? Will you act before we perish in these waves?" And Jesus rises, his presence a beacon piercing the storm's fury. He speaks to the wind and waves, "Quiet, be still," Mark 4:39. And in an instant, the sea bows in reverent silence, the air growing calm as if in awe of its creator. Then he turns to his disciples, his eyes searching the quaking depths of their hearts. "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Mark 4:40. Feel the weight of this piercing question. The air softens, the scent of salt water and damp wood rising as the boat sways gently in the newfound stillness. The stars emerge once more, their light dancing upon the tranquil water. Yet the disciples' fear lingers like a shadow that refuses to fade. Jesus does not question the storm's power. He questions their trust in him after beholding his miracles. Why do they believe the waves hold greater authority than their Savior? And now he turns this question to you. Why are you so afraid? You have felt his hand in your life, moments of provision when all seemed lost, protection in the face of danger, mercy undeserved in your darkest hours. You have read his promise etched in the sacred text, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." Hebrews 13:5. You call him Lord with your lips, yet why does fear still bind your spirit like chains? What tempest rages within your life that overshadows the one who commands the seas to be still? Is it the fear of scarcity, whispering that you will never have enough to sustain you? Is it the specter of failure, haunting your every step with the dread of falling short? Is it the uncertainty of tomorrow, stealing your peace in the quiet of the night, whatever it may be? Jesus stands within the vessel of your life, yet you act as if abandoned, as if the waves possess more power than the one who shaped them with a word. Your fear does not spring from the storm's magnitude. It rises from what you truly believe about Jesus. If you held fast to the truth that he is the Son of God, wielding dominion over all creation, would fear still reign within you if you trusted his word? In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. John 16:33. Would anxiety still consume your heart? Imagine your life if you lived as though Jesus were truly present beside you. Would you still grasp worry like a shield against the unknown? Or would you rest in the peace that flows from his presence? Would you still allow fear to dictate your path? Or would you step boldly into the calling he has placed upon your soul? The psalmist sings with unshaken faith. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Psalm 23:4. And then do you walk as if he is not your guide, your shield, your light? This question demands the truth that lies buried within you. Search your heart with courage. What storm rages in the hidden places of your spirit, casting doubt upon his care for you? What fear have you nurtured, allowing its voice to drown out the whisper of his love? For Jesus does not merely still the tempest that surrounds you. He stills the tempest within you. He slept in the boat not out of indifference, but because he knew the storm could not prevail against his will. And he knows your storm cannot prevail if you place your trust in him. Do you trust him when the waters rise to overwhelm you? Do you trust him when his silence stretches long and the night grows deep? Do you trust him when the world declares you lost and forsaken? True faith is not the trust you offer when the sea lies calm and the sun shines bright. It is the trust that holds firm when the storm rages and he has yet to speak. Let this question echo through the corridors of your spirit. Yet another awaits, one that will probe the depths of your will. But do you want to be healed? Envision the scene, the pool of Bethesda, a place where the air hangs heavy with the sour stench of sickness and the weight of despair. The afflicted lie scattered across the cold stones, their bodies a testament to years of waiting, their breaths shallow with hope deferred. Among them rests a man, crippled for 38 years, his mat worn thin, his eyes dimmed by a resignation born of endless disappointment. He watches others rise, healed by the stirring of the pool's waters, but he remains, always too slow, always alone in his suffering. Then Jesus approaches, his presence like a dawn breaking through the gloom, his steps measured, his gaze fixed upon the man with a knowing tenderness. He knows every year of anguish, every dream shattered upon the rocks of despair, every night spent in silent longing for deliverance. Yet he does not heal with a mere gesture. He kneels beside the man, his voice soft yet piercing like a ray of light through darkness. Do you want to be healed? John 5:6. Feel the profound weight of this question. The air grows still, the murmurs of the crowd fading into a distant hum as the man's heart quickens with a mixture of hope and fear. The scent of damp stone and stagnant water clings to the atmosphere, a mirror of his endless vigil by the pool's edge. Why would Jesus ask this of him? Is it not evident that every soul yearns for healing who would not desire to be made whole? But the man does not answer with a simple yes. Instead, he offers a litany of excuses, his voice low and weary. "Sir," he murmurs, "I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." John 5:7. His words are not born of faith, they are a shield of blame, a cloak of resignation woven from decades of unfulfilled hope. And yet Jesus sees beyond the surface of those words. He perceives a heart that has grown comfortable in its brokenness, a soul that has built an identity around its pain. Fearing the unknown freedom that healing might bring, do you want to be healed is not a question about the pool's magic. It is a question of the man's will, a challenge to his deepest desire. Does he truly yearn for transformation, or has he settled into the familiar chains of his affliction? Now Jesus turns this question to you. Do you want to be healed, not merely your flesh, but your spirit, your heart, the very soul that dwells within you? What wound do you nurse that you have learned to accept as part of your being? What pain have you embraced, dreading the mystery of who you might become if you were set free from its grip? The scent of the pool lingers in your mind, its ripples reflecting the hesitations that ripple through your own heart. You say you seek freedom, but do you truly desire it with all your soul? Or have you found a strange solace in the excuses you cling to? I would trust God, but my past burdens me with chains I cannot break. I would forgive, but the wound cuts too deep to heal. I would change, but the path ahead seems too steep and shadowed to climb. Healing is not a passive gift bestowed without cost. It is a deliberate choice, a step taken in faith. Jesus commands the man, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk," John 5:8. And in that fleeting instant, the man obeys. His legs, dormant for decades, awaken with a strength. His heart, shackled by despair, breaks free into the radiant light of liberation. But what if he had refused? What if he had said, "I cannot. The years have bound me too tightly. I am too weak to rise"? He would have remained by the pool, not for lack of Jesus' power, but for want of his own faith to embrace it. Search your soul with honesty. What excuse keeps you bound to your present state? What sin, what bitterness, what fear do you cradle close? Convinced it defines the essence of who you are, Jesus stands before you, offering the gift of liberation. But he will not force you to rise from the dust. Do you want to be healed? He asks, his voice a blend of compassion and challenge that echoes through your being. Will you stand and walk in the freedom he offers? Or will you linger in the shadows of your past? The prophet Jeremiah cries out in supplication, "Heal me, O Lord, and I will be healed. Save me, and I will be saved." Jeremiah 17:14. Yet healing demands more than a cry, it requires surrender. It demands that you release the mat you have clung to through the years, the crutch of your pain. It demands trusting that Jesus is sufficient, that his grace can make you whole. Now, imagine your life if you embrace the healing he extends to you. Would you still harbor resentment like a bitter root? Or would you walk the path of forgiveness with a lightened heart? Would you still cower in the shadows of shame? Or would you step boldly into the radiance of his love? Would you still define yourself by the scars of your wounds? Or would you live as one restored, a vessel of his grace? Ayin, this question stands as a turning point upon your journey, yet the path stretches onward. With another question to test the priorities of your heart. What good is it to gain the whole world? Envision the scene, a bustling marketplace and alive with the clatter of coins and the sharp, exotic scent of spices wafting through the air. Merchants cry out, their voices a symphony of greed, while buyers chase after treasures that glitter brightly yet fade into dust. The world pulses with promises of wealth, of status, of unassailable security. But Jesus stands apart from the throng, his voice cutting through the din like a trumpet call from the heavens. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Matthew 16:26. Feel the weight of this solemn question. The marketplace's clamor softens, giving way to a profound silence that hums with the resonance of eternity. The scent of spices lingers briefly, only to be overtaken by the dry whisper of dust, the dust to which all earthly gains must return. What is the true worth of your soul, that eternal essence within you? What are you exchanging it for in the markets of this fleeting world? Imagine a man who possesses all that the earth can offer. His name echoes through the quarters of history, his coffers overflow with gold, his life a towering monument to human achievement. He commands vast lands, garners the respect of nations, builds legacies that rise like mountains above the plains. Yet in the quiet of the night, his soul yawns with an emptiness that no treasure can fill. He has scaled the heights of success, only to find the peak rests against a crumbling wall, destined to fall. This is the tragedy that Jesus forewarns with his piercing words. And now he poses this question to you. What are you pursuing that demands the price of your soul? Is it the relentless chase for wealth, stealing the hours you might spend in communion with God? Is it the insatiable thirst for approval, drawing you away from the truth he has revealed? And is it the illusion of control, blinding you to the divine design that governs your days? The world promises fulfillment with a siren's song, but its allure is a deception. You can gather all its riches, gold that glitters, fame that fades, power that crumbles, and still awaken to a hollow void within your spirit. As Ecclesiastes laments with a weary voice, "Vanity of vanities," says the preacher. Vanity of vanities all is vanity. Ecclesiastes 1:2, your soul is an eternal flame, while the world's treasures are but fleeting shadows. Why, then, do you barter the imperishable for the perishable, trading your birthright for a bowl of stew? Search your heart with a searching gaze. What consumes your thoughts, your time, the very essence of your being? Is it the kingdom of God, with its promise of righteousness and peace, or the fleeting kingdoms of this temporal realm? Jesus warns with clarity. No one can serve two masters. You cannot serve God and money, Matthew 6:24. Yet how often do you attempt the impossible, striving to balance both upon the scales of your life? How often do you hoard what fades into dust while neglecting the treasures that endure forever? The enemy rejoices in this subtle ruse. He does not seize your soul with force or violence. He persuades you to surrender it, one compromise at a time, like a thief in the night, a night spent toiling for gain instead of kneeling in prayer, a choice made for worldly profit rather than heavenly glory, a life erected upon the shifting sands of self rather than the solid rock of Christ. Imagine standing before the throne of God at the close of your earthly days. Your wealth has vanished like mist at dawn. Your deeds faded into the silence of oblivion. Your status a mere whisper carried away by the wind. Only one thing remains your soul, the eternal essence that defines you. What will its value be in that moment of judgment? Jesus asks. What good is it to gain the whole world, yet forfeit your soul? Will you answer with a life squandered on the transient, or one anchored in the eternal verities of his kingdom? Pause and reflect upon this truth. What would your days look like if you sought the kingdom of God above all else? Would you still chase the fleeting acclaim of the world? Or would you seek his favor alone as your heart's desire? Would you still amass wealth to fill your barns? Or would you give with open hands to bless others in his name? Would you still live for the fleeting pleasures of the moment? Or would you invest in the everlasting promise of his eternal realm? This question is both a solemn caution and a radiant promise. For Jesus also declares with authority, "Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you," Matthew 6:33. Your soul outweighs the riches of the world in value beyond measure. Will you guard it as the treasure it is, or will you trade it away for the baubles of this earth? Another question looms on the horizon, one that will examine the obedience of your heart. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I say? Envision the scene of verdant hillside where the crowd gathers, their cloaks spread like petals upon the grass, their eyes fixed upon Jesus with a mixture of awe and wonder. The air is warm, infused with the sweet fragrance of wildflowers and the subtle tang of human effort rising from the throng. They call him Teacher, Prophet, Lord. Their voices lifted in praise and curiosity. They cling to his words, marvel at the miracles performed by his hand. But Jesus perceives the hidden corners of their hearts. He knows that titles are easily spoken, yet obedience is a costly offering laid upon the altar of faith. So he asks, his voice steady and searching, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say?" Luke 6:46. Feel the weight of this penetrating inquiry. The breeze stills, the crowd falls into a reverent silence, as if the earth itself pauses to await your response. The scent of wildflowers fades, replaced by the heavy aroma of conviction that settles into the marrow of your bones. To name him Lord is to crown him Master, King, sovereign over every aspect of your life. Yet how often do you invoke his name with your lips while turning a deaf ear to his commands? Imagine a soldier who salutes his commander with a crisp "sir," yet defies every order with bold rebellion. Is he truly loyal in the heat of battle, or a child who addresses someone as father yet spurns his guidance with a stubborn heart? Is he truly obedient in the ways of the home? Then, do you believe you can call Jesus Lord and treat his words as optional? A suggestion to be followed only when convenient. Search your soul with a fearless gaze. What directives from Jesus have you heard yet chosen to ignore? He said, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you," Matthew 5:44. Do you extend that love even to those who wound you deepest? He said, "Forgive, and you will be forgiven," Luke 6:37. Have you released the forgiveness that sets your spirit free? He said, "Go and make disciples of all nations," Matthew 28:19. Are you fulfilling that sacred commission with the life you live? And the scent of the hillside lingers, a gentle reminder of the choice laid before you, like a path diverging in the wilderness. As James warns with solemn truth, faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead, James 2:17. Your obedience is the living proof of your faith, the evidence that your belief is more than a hollow sound. If you proclaim him Lord, yet live for the desires of your own heart, what does that confession truly reveal? If you praise his name with fervor, yet turn from his voice, what do you truly believe in the silence of your soul? Jesus paints a vivid picture with his words. The one who hears and obeys is like a man who builds his house upon a rock. When the storm assails with wind and rain, that house stands unshaken, a testament to its firm foundation. But the one who hears yet does not obey is like a man who builds on sand. When the tempest strikes with fury, his house falls with a great crash, Luke 6:47-49. What foundation are you laying with the choices of your life? Is it the solid rock of obedience or the shifting sands of empty words? Pause and reflect upon this truth with a searching heart. What within your life declares that Jesus is truly your Lord, the ruler of your days? What choices have you made because he commanded? Even when the path was steep and the path was thorns, what sins have you abandoned because his truth convicted you with a burning light? For Jesus is not swayed by the titles you bestow upon him. He sees the heart, the deeds, the surrender that defines your walk with him. Well, I'll imagine standing before him now in the presence of his glory, his eyes, both compassionate and just, pierce through every facade you have built to shield your soul. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, And do not do what I say, he asks, his voice a blend of love and righteous challenge. Will you answer with a life of faithful obedience, or with the excuses that crumble in his light? For he declared with eternal authority, if you love me, keep my commandments, John 14:15. Your love for him is measured not by your words, but by the actions that flow from a heart aligned with his will. Another question awaits, one that will quiet the voices of shame that haunt your spirit. Yenda, where are your accusers? Envision the scene, the temple courts, where the air is dense with the gritty dust of judgment and the low hum of a condemning crowd. A woman is thrust before Jesus, her garments torn, her face flushed with the heat of humiliation. She has been caught in the act of adultery, her sin laid bare for all to see and scorn. The Pharisees hurl her at his feet, their voices thick with self-righteous indignation. Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses commands us to stone such women. What do you say, John 8:4-5? The crowd presses in, their breath hot and heavy, the scent of stone and perspiration thick in the air. The woman trembles, bracing herself for the first stone that will end her life. But Jesus does not respond at once. He bends down, tracing figures in the dust with his finger, as if the accusations swirling around him are but fleeting shadows beneath his feet. The silence stretches taut, charged with anticipation. Then he rises, his voice calm yet authoritative. Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her, John 8:7. One by one, the accusers slip away, their stones clattering to the ground like the fall of their own pride. The air clears, the scent of dust settling as the throng disperses into the shadows. The woman remains, alone with Jesus, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope, her shame exposed yet unjudged. He speaks, his voice gentle yet penetrating. Woman, where are your accusers? Has no one condemned you, John 8:10? She whispers, her voice trembling. No one, Lord. And he replies with grace, neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin, John 8:11. Feel the profound weight of this question. The temple courts fade away, and you stand in her place, your own failings laid bare, your spirit heavy with the guilt that clings to you. The enemy's voice hisses in the darkness. You are too stained, too broken. God cannot forgive this. But Jesus gazes upon you, his eyes brimming with mercy that knows no end. Where are your accusers, he asks, his voice a balm to your wounded soul. You look around, there is no one left to condemn you. The cross has silenced them forever, its power greater than their judgment. Search your soul with a tender heart. What guilt do you carry that Jesus has already washed away with his blood? What shame do you cling to? Though he has set you free with his grace, Paul writes with assurance. There is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, in Romans 8:1. If Jesus withholds his condemnation, why do you impose it upon yourself with unrelenting force? The scent of the temple lingers, a testament to the grace that found you in your lowest hour. Jesus does not turn a blind eye to your sin, he sees it clearly, yet he covers it with the mantle of his mercy. Go and sin no more is not a demand for perfection that you cannot attain. It is an invitation to walk in the liberty he has purchased for you with his own life. But you must choose to rise, to leave the dust of your past behind and step into the light of his forgiveness. Imagine your life if you truly embrace the freedom he offers. Would you still cower in the shadows of shame? Or would you stride boldly in the strength of his love? Would you still listen to the enemy's lies that bind you? Or would you hearken to the voice of your Savior that liberates you? Would you still carry the burdens of yesterday? Or would you dance in the lightness of grace that lifts your spirit to new heights? This question is a treasure beyond measure, a gift of mercy in the midst of judgment. Yet another awaits, one that will challenge the trust you place in him. But why do you worry? Envision the scene, a hillside awash with wildflowers, their vibrant hues a striking contrast against the rich. Green earth, the air is crisp and fresh, infused with the scent of grass and the gentle trill of birds soaring freely above. Jesus sits among his disciples, The multitude gathered close, their faces marked by the cares and anxieties of daily survival. They fret over bread to fill their stomachs, garments to cover their bodies, the needs that press upon them with the dawn of each new day. And Jesus, his voice serene yet cutting through their fears, asks, "Why do you worry about what you will eat or what you will wear?" Matthew 6:25. Feel the weight of this gentle question. The breeze carries the fragrance of blossoms, a silent testament to God's provision woven into the fabric of creation. The birds glide overhead, untroubled by the need to store for tomorrow, their trust a lesson written in the sky. Yet your heart races, ensnared by the tendrils of unease that wrap around your spirit. Why do you worry when your Heavenly Father knows your every need before you voice it? Jesus lifts his hand towards the birds that flit above. Consider the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your Heavenly Father feeds them. Matthew 6:26. He gestures to the flowers that carpet the hillside, adorned in splendor that outshines the robes of Solomon. Are you not much more valuable than they? He asked with quiet authority. Matthew 6:26. Your worry is not about the necessities of life. It is about the faith you hold or fail to hold in the one who provides. Search your soul with a seeking heart. What robs you of rest? Replaying fears that alter nothing in the course of your days? Is it the dread of want, whispering that you will never have enough? Is it the specter of failure, haunting your every endeavor with the shadow of defeat? Is it the uncertainty of tomorrow, stealing your peace in the stillness of the night? Jesus probes deeper. Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? Matthew 6:27. The answer echoes in the silence, no. Worry plunders your spirit, but it never enriches your days. The scent of wildflowers persists, a witness to the care of the Creator who tends to every detail. As David sings with unwavering faith, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Psalm 23:1. Your Father in heaven sees you, knows the needs that stir within your heart before your lips form the prayer. Matthew 6:8. Then do you live as if you were an orphan, forsaken and alone? Once imagine your life unshackled from the chains of worry. Would you still grasp fear like a lifeline in the storm? Or would you rest in the peace that flows from his presence? Would you still chase after control over every detail? Or would you yield to his will with a trusting heart? Would you still allow anxiety to reign over your spirit? Or would you walk in the serenity that transcends all understanding? Jesus offers a path to follow. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Matthew 6:33. Worry is a thief that steals your joy, but faith is a fortress that stands unshaken. Will you choose to trust in him, or will you permit fear to dominate the landscape of your soul? This marks the close of our initial voyage through these sacred waters, but the journey is far from its end. A call to contemplation. We have walked through 7 questions, each a beacon piercing the darkness of the night, each a mirror reflecting the hidden truths of your spirit. Who do you say that I am called you to define the faith that anchors your soul? Why are you so afraid? Tested the trust you place in his care. Do you want to be healed? Challenge the excuses that bind you to your pain. What good is it to gain the whole world? Weigh the priorities that shape your days. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I say? Demanded the obedience that proves your love. Where are your accusers? Granted you the freedom of his forgiveness. Why do you worry? Invited you into the peace of his provision. You pause now and let these inquiries sink deep into the marrow of your being. The scent of the hillside, the sea, the temple, the wildflowers, they linger like echoes of the moments when Jesus spoke. Each fragrance a thread in the tapestry of his presence. The air grows thick with a sacred stillness. The distant sound of a harp string plucked in the courts of heaven, weaving a celestial melody into the silence that surrounds you. A gentle rustle of leaves, like the breath of angels passing by, caresses your skin, urging you to listen with your heart. The faint aroma of myrrh rises, a whisper of the divine presence that envelops you in its embrace. A soft warmth, like the touch of holy light, wraps around your spirit, drawing you ever closer to the eternal throne. A subtle tremor, like the pulse of creation itself, stirs beneath your feet, and a delicate fragrance of sacred oil lingers faintly in the air, with a hint of divine peace and gentle serenity that envelops your soul with divine grace and eternal hope, that lifts your spirit with heavenly strength and boundless love, that fills your heart with divine joy and sacred peace, that renews your soul with eternal light and holy stillness, that calms your spirit with divine rest. His voice is not distant, a fading echo lost in time. It resounds now, in this very hour, compelling you to respond to his call. What will you make of these questions that stir within you? Will you let them drift away like a passing breeze, carried off by the winds of distraction, or will you permit them to transform your being, reshaping the contours of your soul? Will you hold them at arm's length, a curiosity to ponder but not embrace, or will you allow them to pierce the core of your spirit, revealing the truths you have hidden even from yourself? For as the prophet Isaiah declares with divine assurance, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. Jeremiah 29:13, yet seeking demands more than a fleeting glance. It requires an answer born of commitment. Search your soul with a heart laid bare. Which of these questions has stirred the deepest waters within you, awakening emotions long buried, which has caused you to tremble, to see yourself reflected anew in the mirror of his truth? Have you felt the weight of, who do you say that I am, pressing you to define your allegiance with clarity and courage? Has why are you so afraid uncovered? The fears you have concealed beneath a facade of strength does. Do you want to be healed? Awaken a longing you have suppressed in the silence of your heart. What hidden corner of your spirit does? Why do you worry? Illuminate with its gentle light. For Jesus seeks not the empty words that fall from your lips. He seeks you, your heart laid open, your trust surrendered, your life transformed by his presence. The journey presses onward, its path stretching into the horizon of your soul. More questions await, each deeper than the last, each more searing in its call to transformation. Will you advance with bold steps, or will you withdraw into the safety of the familiar? The choice is yours to make, but know this: Jesus abides with you, his gaze fixed upon your every move, his voice calling through the ages with unchanging love. What will your answer be in this sacred moment? Will you step forward, allowing these questions to carve a new path within the landscape of your soul? Or will you linger, bound by the chains of hesitation that hold you back from his embrace? Let us pause here, yet not for long, for the journey is far from complete. The path ahead glows with the promise of questions that will draw you ever nearer to the heart of God. Will you take the next stride, embracing the transformation these words herald with their divine power? The stars above stand as witnesses to your choice. The wind holds its breath in anticipation, and the silence waits with bated breath for your response, its echo resonating with the promise of eternal life that awaits those who answer his call. Have you ever heard a voice in the stillness? A resonance that pierces the veil of your soul before a question emerges from the shadows, its weight pressing upon your spirit like a sacred burden. What if the questions of Jesus, cloaked in celestial enigma, hold the power to unveil the eternal destiny woven into the fabric of your being, a destiny hidden beneath layers of doubt and longing, in the silent depths of your heart, as you yearn for a glimmer of divine light to pierce the darkness? Have you felt his gaze upon you, his words slicing through the velvet night like a sword of pure, unyielding radiance? If the one who commands the stars and stills the seas chooses to inquire rather than dictate, are you bold enough to face the truth? He whispers into the recesses of your soul, a truth that trembles with eternal consequence. Imagine in this very moment, a voice both gentle and omnipotent calling from the eternal void. Its tone a blend of mercy and majesty. Will you heed my words, O wanderer of the Spirit, and step into the light I offer? Listen closely, for this is no mere story crafted by human hands, no fleeting tale spun from the dust of earthly imagination. This is a holy odyssey through the uncharted wilderness of your existence, where each question of Jesus kindles a divine fire to illuminate your faltering steps toward the infinite. A fire that burns away the shadows of your past. A solemn breeze drifts across the desolate plain, bearing the faint aroma of ancient myrrh mingled with the crisp, ethereal scent of dew-kissed stone from a forgotten altar. A fragrance that speaks of ages lost to time. You stand upon a windswept ridge, the earth beneath your feet firm yet trembling with a sacred pulse. Its texture reminiscent of the hands that shaped the mountains in the dawn of creation. Hands that now guide your soul. Above, the heavens unfold in a vast, boundless tapestry, stars shimmering with a light that seems to breathe with life, each a silent sentinel bearing witness to the eternal queries that have guided humanity's soul through the ages. The air thickens with an unseen presence, a holy whisper that brushes against your spirit like the touch of an angel's wing, calling your name with a question that echoes through the hollow chambers of your heart. Will you respond to this divine summons? Or will you retreat into the shadows that cling to your fears? Shadows that whisper of doubt and despair. What lies within you? When the eyes of the Eternal One search the depths of your soul, peering into the hidden corners where your truest self resides. This journey continues at the sacred forge where faith is purified and strength is born anew. A place where the dross of your spirit is melted away to reveal the gold within. Jesus, the embodiment of the Word, the Alpha and Omega, posed 37 questions within the sacred text, answering but 3 with his divine wisdom. Why does the one who holds the keys to creation, who spoke the worlds into being, choose to ask, to draw forth the hidden truths buried within the human heart? The answer rests not in his need for knowledge, for he knows all things, but in your longing for awakening, your hunger for the light that reveals your purpose. These questions are torches cast into the darkness of your spirit, not to expose the face you present to the world, the mask you wear for others' approval, but to illuminate the secret heart you shield from the light, the heart where your true allegiance dwells. They are gateways to the eternal, standing ajar like ancient portals, inviting you to cross into the divine unknown with trembling steps. Each threshold a step closer to his presence. Let us venture deeper into the next of these sacred inquiries, a question that probes the courage buried within the depths of your soul, a courage waiting to be awakened. Do you believe I can do this? Picture the scene, a dusty roadside near Jericho, where the air hums with the rugged scent of dry earth and the faint, tangy aroma of olive oil pressed from a nearby grove, a scent that speaks of labor and hope. 2 blind men sit by the path, their faces etched with the weariness of years spent in an unyielding darkness, their ears straining to catch the rhythm of the passing crowd, a crowd alive with whispers of miracles. Rumors swirl around them like a gentle storm tales of a healer, a teacher, a man named Jesus who restores sight to the blind, who breathes life into the dead, whose very presence defies the laws of nature. As he approaches, their voices rise in desperate unison, a cry that pierces the air, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us, Matthew 9:27. The multitude presses close, their murmurs a cacophony of doubt and wonder, a tapestry of human voices woven with skepticism and awe. Yet Jesus pauses, his steps still upon the dusty ground, and he turns toward them, his gaze piercing the veil of their blindness like a ray of dawn breaking through the night. Do you believe that I am able to do this? He asks, his voice a steady flame amid the noise, a voice that carries the weight of eternity, Matthew 9:28. A silence falls, heavy with the weight of their answer, a silence that presses upon the earth itself. This is no casual query born of curiosity, no fleeting thought cast into the wind. This is the moment where faith meets the edge of the impossible, where the human spirit stands at the threshold of the divine. Not what others believe with their fleeting words, not what tradition dictates with its rigid laws, but what resides in the depths of their hearts, the silent chambers where truth resides. Do they trust that he holds the power to shatter their darkness, to restore what has been lost to the shadows? Feel the intensity of this sacred encounter, a moment that reverberates through time. The air grows still, the scent of dust and olive oil rising like an offering to the heavens, grounding you in the gravity of their choice, a choice that echoes in your own soul. The blind men's voices tremble as they reply, "Yes, Lord," their words a fragile bridge between despair and hope. a bridge built on the foundation of faith. Jesus touches their eyes, his fingers gentle yet powerful. And with a single word, light floods their world, a flood that banishes the night. According to your faith, let it be done to you, Matthew 9:29. But what of you, O seeker of the light, O wanderer in the shadows of your own making? Do you believe he can do this? Not merely heal the body, a fleeting vessel of clay, but mend the brokenness within your spirit. Restore the vision of your soul that is dim beneath the weight of worldly cares. Is he the one who can lift you from the shadows of doubt that cling like mist? The one who can turn your endless night into a dawn of eternal glory. Reflect upon this truth, a truth that burns with divine fire. Your belief is the key that unlocks his power, the key that opens the door to miracles beyond imagining. If you stand before him with a heart of faith, a heart laid bare before the throne of grace, what miracle might he work within the depths of your being? What transformation might he wrought in the silence of your soul if you trust that he can calm the storms that rage within you, heal the wounds that fester in the hidden places, guide your faltering steps through the valleys of shadow? What chains might fall away? Shattered by the light of his presence, the psalmist proclaims with unshaken voice, "Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles." Isaiah 40:31. Do you hope with such faith? A faith that rises above the unbelief that blinds your soul? Or do you linger in the darkness, bound by the doubts that whisper in the night? Envision yourself before him now, in the stillness of this eternal moment. His hands, scarred yet gentle, reach towards you with a love that transcends time. His eyes filled with a compassion that sees beyond your flaws, beyond the masks you wear. Do you believe that I am able to do this, he asks, his voice resonating through the silence of your heart. A voice that calls you to rise. Your breath catches in your throat. Your spirit trembles with the weight of his question. Will you answer with the faith of the blind men? A faith kindled by the fire of heaven? Or will you shrink from the promise of his power, retreating into the safety of your doubt? This question is the foundation of your trust, the cornerstone upon which your faith is built. It is the line that divides the faithful from the doubtful, the healed from the hopeless, the redeemed from the lost. For Jesus declares with divine authority, everything is possible for one who believes, Mark 9:23, a promise that echoes through the ages. Your belief opens the door to his miracles, a door that swings wide with the power of his grace. Yet it demands more than empty words. It demands a heart surrendered to his will, a will that shapes the stars and calms the seas. If you believe he can, will you live as though he will? Walking in the light of that faith, if you trust his power, will you step boldly into the radiance he offers, leaving the shadows behind? Ati, what would it mean to live with such belief? A belief that transforms your every breath. Would you release the doubts that bind you, confident that he holds all authority over the heavens and the earth, a authority that bends the knee of creation? Would you surrender the fears that haunt your nights, knowing his touch can restore you? A touch that heals the broken and raises the dead. Would you walk boldly through the darkest valleys, trusting his promise to guide you with a light that never fades, a promise etched in the eternal word? The prophet Jeremiah assures with divine certainty, "Call to me, and I will answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know." Jeremiah 33:3, if you believe he can, why do you hesitate to call upon him, to seek the mysteries he longs to reveal? This is but one step deeper into the mystery, a step that draws you closer to the heart of the divine. Another question awaits, one that will test the obedience hidden within the depths of your heart, an obedience waiting to be claimed. If I want him to remain alive, what is that to you? Imagine the scene, a quiet shore by the Sea of Galilee, where the air carries the salty breath of the waves and the faint, earthy scent of fish drying in the sun, a scent that speaks of provision and sacrifice. Peter walks with Jesus, his sandals crunching on the smooth pebbles that line the shore, his heart heavy with the memory of his threefold denial and the joy of his restoration, a restoration that binds him to his Lord. The disciple whom Jesus loved follows close behind, a silent witness to their conversation. His presence a shadow of devotion. Jesus speaks to Peter, entrusting him with the care of his flock. A sacred charge, feed my sheep, John 21:17. A command that echoes with the weight of eternity. Then, turning to the beloved disciple, Peter asked with a hint of curiosity, Lord, what about him, John 21:21? His voice tinged with the human frailty of comparison. Jesus' response is firm, a question veiled in divine authority that cuts through the air. If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me, John 21:22. On a stillness settles over the shore, the waves pausing as if to listen to the voice of their creator. A stillness that holds the breath of the earth. This is no mere rebuke born of a passing moment. It is a call to focus, a challenge to obedience that resonates with the rhythm of the divine will. Not concern for the paths of others, not speculation on their fate woven by human hands, but devotion to your own calling, a calling etched in the stars. What is the plan of the Master to you? When he commands your steps with a voice that shakes the foundations of the world, or sense the weight of this sacred moment, a moment that hangs in the balance of your choice. The air grows calm, the scent of the sea mingling with the earthy aroma of the shore, anchoring you in the decision that lies before you, a decision that shapes your destiny. Jesus does not explain his will for the other disciple. He redirects Peter to his own mission, a mission that demands singular focus. Follow me, he says, and let the rest be mine to ordain, a command that lifts the burden of comparison. And now he turns to you, his gaze piercing the veil of your thoughts. What is that to you? When he calls you to follow with a voice that echoes through the ages, do you question the path of others, wondering why their journey unfolds differently from yours? A journey marked by trials and triumphs. Do you compare their blessings, their trials, their end? A comparison that dims the light of your own calling. Instead of heeding his voice that speaks to your soul alone, your obedience is not measured by the story of another, a story written in the sands of time, but by your response to his command, a command that carves your path. If he wills another to remain, to linger in this world until his return, to suffer or to prosper, what is that to you? A question that demands your surrender. The Apostle Paul writes with divine wisdom, each one should carry their own load, Galatians 6:5, a load that is yours to bear alone. Your load is to follow, to trust his plan for you alone, a plan that unfolds with every step you take. Yet how often do you stray, distracted by the paths of those around you, paths that lead you astray from his voice? Envision standing before him now, in the quiet of this eternal encounter, his gaze, both loving and commanding, rests upon you with a power that stills the storm, his words clear in the stillness that surrounds you. If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me, he says, his voice a blend of grace and authority that calls you to rise. Your heart stirs with the weight of his call. Your mind races with the implications of his command. Will you follow, releasing the burden of others' destinies that weighs upon your soul, a burden you were never meant to carry, or will you linger, bound by the comparisons that dim your faith, comparisons that fade in the light of his truth? This question calls you to obedience, a call that echoes through the corridors of your spirit. It is the boundary between self-will and surrender, a surrender that frees you from the chains of distraction, between the distraction of others' paths and the devotion that leads you to his heart. Jesus commands, follow me, and in that command lies your purpose, a purpose that shines like a beacon in the night. If you obey, will you trust his design for every soul, including your own, a design woven with threads of love and grace? If you heed his voice, will you walk the path he sets, a path that leads through thorns and triumphs, regardless of the journey of others, a journey that fades into the distance? Imagine your life if you followed with such focus, a focus that lights your way. Would you still question his will for others? It creates beyond your understanding, or would you embrace your own calling with a joy that overflows? Would you still compare your trials, trials that test your faith? Or would you trust his plan as sufficient, a plan that sustains you, Would you still waver, a wavering that weakens your resolve? Or would you stride forward in the strength of his command? A strength that never fails, the psalmist declares with unwavering faith. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path, Psalm 119, 105. A light that guides through the darkest night. If his word guides you, why do you look to the side rather than ahead? A side that leads to shadows. What would it mean to live with such obedience? An obedience that transforms your days. Would you release the need to control others' fates? A need that binds you. Trusting that his hand shapes all things, would you surrender the desire to know their end, an end hidden from your sight? Resting in the knowledge that his timing is perfect, would you walk with a heart at peace, a peace that surpasses understanding? Proclaiming his name with every step, a name that echoes through eternity, the prophet Isaiah sings. Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. Isaiah 40:31. A strength that lifts you above the fray, if his strength renews you. Why do you falter under the weight of others' paths? This is but a deeper step into the mystery, a step that draws you closer to the divine will. Another question awaits, one that will challenge the love that dwells within the depths of your heart, a love waiting to be purified. Do you love me more than these? Picture the scene, the same Galilean shore. The air now tinged with the smoky scent of a charcoal fire where fish sizzle and bread warms. A scent that speaks of provision and communion. Peter stands before Jesus, the morning light reflecting off the gentle waves. His heart laid bare after the threefold denial that haunts his memory. A denial now washed by grace. Jesus, having risen from the grave, turns to him with a question that cuts to the core of his being, Simon, son of John. Do you love me more than these, John 21:15? A question that pierces the silence. The these, the nets, the fish, the life he once knew, a life of toil and security lie at his feet, symbols of his former self, a self he must leave behind. Wait, Dan. A hush falls over the shore, the waves whispering their assent to the silence, a silence that holds the breath of creation. This is no simple query cast into the wind, it is a test of love. A call to prioritize the heart over the hands. A call that demands your all. Not love for the world with its fleeting pleasures. Not love for the past with its familiar chains. But love for him above all else. A love that rises above the temporal. Do you love me more than these? He asks. Drawing Peter and you into the depths of the soul where true devotion reside. Feel the weight of this sacred encounter. A moment that reverberates through eternity. The air grows still, the scent of the fire and the sea rising like an incense offered to the heavens, enveloping you in the moment of choice, a choice that defines your destiny. Peter responds, his voice trembling with the weight of his past. Yes, Lord, you know that I love you, and Jesus entrusts him with his sheep. A trust that restores John 21:16. 3 times the question comes, 3 times the affirmation, a restoration of love through obedience. A love that binds him anew. Now he asks you, his voice reaching into the silence of your heart, do you love me more than these, more than the comforts of this world that cradle you in ease, the ambitions you chase that fade with the dawn, the fears you hold that bind your spirit? Is your love for him the flame that burns brighter than all else in your life, a flame that lights the darkest night? Your love is proven not in the words that fall from your lips, words that can deceive, but in the devotion that flows from your actions. Actions that speak truth. If you love him, will you forsake the nets of your past for his call? A call that demands sacrifice if you cherish him. Will you feed his sheep with the love he pours into you? A love that overflows to others, the Apostle John writes with divine insight. We love because he first loved us, 1 John 4:19. A love that began at the cross. Does your love reflect his? A reflection of the cross? Or is it dimmed by the these you cling to? The these that pull you away? Envision yourself before him now, in the stillness of this eternal moment. His eyes, filled with the love that bore the cross, a love that bled for you. Search your heart, searching the depths where your true love resides. Do you love me more than these, he asks, his voice a gentle yet piercing call that demands an answer. Your spirit of all. Surrendering the these that bind you to the earth, a surrender that frees you, or will you hold back, tethered to the world you know, a world that fades? Marciom, this question is the measure of your devotion, a measure that weighs your heart. It is the divide between earthly love and divine allegiance, a divide that separates the temporal from the eternal. Between self with its desires and sacrifice with its glory, Jesus says with eternal authority, "If you love me, keep my commands." John 14:15. A command that tests your love. Your love is not a fleeting feeling that wanes with the night. It is a life lived for him, a life that shines with his light. If you love him more, will you live it fully, a life fully his? What would your days be if you loved him above all? A love that transforms. Would you still cling to the nets of comfort that cradle you? Or would you cast them aside for his service? A service that glorifies. Would you still pursue the world's treasures that fade with time? Or would you seek his kingdom first? A kingdom that endures. Would you still hesitate? A hesitation that binds? Or would you follow with a heart ablaze with love, a love that never fails? The Song of Solomon sings with tender devotion. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. Song of Solomon 6:3, a song that binds you to him if he is yours. Why do you share your love with these? A sharing that dims your flame. What would it mean to love him with such depth, a depth that reshapes your soul? Would you release the hold of worldly pleasures, pleasures that fade, trusting his joy to fill you? Would you surrender the ambitions that drive you, ambitions that crumble, seeking his will alone? Would you walk with a heart unbound, a heart that sings his praise, a praise that echoes through eternity? The prophet Hosea calls, let us know, let us press on to know the Lord. Hosea 6:3, a call to love. If his love draws you, why do you linger with these that cannot save? This is but a deeper call to love, a call that draws you closer to his heart. Another question awaits, one that will test the readiness that lies within the depths of your spirit, a readiness waiting to be claimed. Are you ready to drink the cup and drink? Imagine the scene, a quiet moment in an upper room, the air heavy with the scent of unleaded bread and the bitter aroma of wine, a scent that speaks of sacrifice and redemption. The disciples gather around Jesus, their hearts stirred by the Passover feast, a feast that foreshadows the cross, yet unaware of the shadow that looms. James and John, sons of Zebedee, approach with a bold request through their mother, a request born of ambition. Grant that one of us may sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory. Matthew 20:21, a glory they seek without cost. Jesus turns to them, his voice solemn yet inviting, a voice that carries the weight of the cross. Can you drink the cup I am going to drink? Matthew 20:22, a question that pierces their dreams. A stillness descends upon the room, the air holding its breath, a breath that waits for their answer. This is no casual challenge cast into the wind. It is a call to share in his suffering. A question of readiness to embrace the cross, a cross that looms on the horizon. Not glory without cost, not honor without sacrifice, but the cup of his passion, a cup filled with pain and love. Are you prepared to drink it, to taste its bitterness and its grace? Feel the weight of this profound inquiry, a moment that reverberates through the ages. The air grows thick, the scent of bread and wine mingling with the heaviness of destiny, drawing you into the choice that lies before you, a choice that defines your faith. The brothers reply with bold confidence, we can. Unaware of the depth of the cup, a depth that holds the agony of Gethsemane, yet Jesus affirms with solemn truth, you will indeed drink my cup, Matthew 20:23, a promise that seals their path. And now he asks you, his voice reaching into the silence of your soul, are you ready to drink the cup I drink? A cup that holds the weight of his suffering, not the cup of ease that the world offers, but the cup of trials that test your faith, of surrender that breaks your will, of suffering for his name that marks your devotion. Is your heart prepared to follow where his love led him to the cross where blood was shed, and beyond to the resurrection that dawns? Your readiness is tested by your willingness. a willingness that shapes your destiny if you follow him. Will you accept the cup he offers, a cup that holds both sorrow and joy, whatever it may contain, if you serve him? Will you bear the weight of his cross with grace, a grace that flows from his sacrifice? The Apostle Paul declares with fervent longing, I want to know Christ, yes, to know the power of his resurrection and participation in his sufferings, Philippians 3:10. A longing that defines his life. Are you willing to share in his sufferings, a sharing that deepens your bond? Or do you seek only his glory, a glory without cost? Envision yourself before him now, in the quiet of this eternal moment. His hands, bearing the marks of the nails that held him to the cross, extend the cup toward you, a cup that trembles with the weight of his love. His eyes filled with a compassion that endured the pain, a pain he bore for you. Are you ready to drink the cup I drink, he asks. His voice a call to sacrifice that echoes through your being. Your spirit quakes with the magnitude of his question. Your resolve tested by the fire of his gaze. Will you drink? Embracing the cost of his love, a cost that redeems, or will you turn away? Fearing the bitterness within, a bitterness that purifies. In this question measures your commitment, a commitment that defines your faith. It is the divide between comfort and consecration, a consecration that sets you apart, between self with its desires and service with its glory. A service that honors him. Jesus warns with divine clarity, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me, Matthew 16:24. A warning that calls to action. If you are ready, will you take up your cross daily, a cross that leads to life? But imagine your life if you drank his cup, a cup that transforms. Would you still shrink from the hardships that test you? Or would you embrace them as his will? A will that shapes you. Would you still seek the ease that the world promises? Or would you find strength in his sacrifice? A sacrifice that sustains. Would you still falter under the weight of trials? Or would you stand firm in the power of his resurrection? A power that raises you, the prophet Isaiah foretells with prophetic voice. He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities, Isaiah 53:5. A piercing that heals. If he drank the cup for you, a cup of wrath turned to grace, will you drink for him, a drinking that glorifies? What would it mean to live with such readiness, a readiness that renews? Would you release the fear of suffering, a fear that binds, trusting his strength to uphold you? Would you surrender the desire for worldly glory, a glory that fades, seeking his kingdom alone? Would you walk with a heart steadfast, a heart that endures, proclaiming his name through every trial, a name that endures forever, the Apostle Peter calls. To this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example, 1 Peter 2:21. A call to follow. If he suffered for you, why do you shrink from the cup he offers? This is but a deeper call to readiness, a call that draws you closer to his sacrifice. Another question awaits, one that will probe the forgiveness that lies within the depths of your heart. A forgiveness waiting to be extended. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant? Picture the scene, a royal court, the air thick with the rich scent of royal incense and the tense aroma of judgment. A scent that speaks of authority and accountability. A servant owes his master 10,000 talents, an unpayable debt that towers over his life, and falls before him pleading for mercy, a plea that rises from the dust. The master, moved with compassion that mirrors the divine, forgives the debt entirely, a forgiveness that lifts the burden. Matthew 18:23-27. Yet this same servant finds a fellow servant owing him 100 denarii, a pittance by comparison, seizes him with unrelenting grip, and demands payment, showing no mercy despite his own release. A release he forgets, Matthew 18:28-30. The master, hearing of this injustice, summons him with a voice of righteous anger. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant, just as I had on you, Matthew 18:33. A question that cuts to the heart. Once, a silence falls over the court, the air holding its breath, a breath that waits for justice. This is no mere reprimand cast into the void, it is a mirror of the heart. A question of grace extended, a grace that reflects the divine. Not judgment for others with its harshness, not vengeance for wrongs with its bitterness, but mercy mirroring the mercy received, a mercy that heals. Shouldn't you have shown it, a showing that honors? Feel the weight of this divine confrontation, a moment that reverberates with eternal truth. The air grows heavy, the scent of incense fading into the bitterness of hypocrisy, a hypocrisy that stains, drawing you into the judgment that looms. The master revokes his mercy with a heavy heart, delivering the servant to the tormentors, a delivery that speaks of consequence, Matthew 18:34. Now he turns to you, his gaze piercing the veil of your actions. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant, a mercy that mirrors his? Have you received his forgiveness, a forgiveness that covers your sins, yet withheld it from those who wrong you? A withholding that binds. Does your heart reflect his grace, a grace that flows like a river, or does it harbor the unforgiveness you were spared? An unforgiveness that darkens. Your mercy is a reflection of his, a reflection that shines with his light. If he forgave your unpayable debt, a debt that spanned the heavens, will you forgive the small offenses against you? Offenses that fade if he released you from the judgment that loomed, a judgment that condemned. Will you release others from your grudge, a grudge that weighs? The Apostle Paul teaches with divine wisdom. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you, Ephesians 4:32. A teaching that calls, do you forgive as you have been forgiven? A forgiveness that frees. Or do you cling to the debts of others? Debts that burden. Envision yourself before him now, in the stillness of this eternal moment, his hands, scarred with the price of your pardon, a pardon bought with blood, reach towards you with a love that heals, his eyes searching your soul, searching the depths where mercy dwells. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant? He asks, his voice a gentle rebuke that stirs your heart, a rebuke that redeems. Your heart convicts with the weight of his words. Your spirit stirs with the call to grace. Will you show mercy, mirroring his grace that flows, a grace that transforms? Or will you hold fast to the bitterness that binds you, a bitterness that chains? This question tests your heart, a test that reveals your soul. It is the divide between received grace and given grace, a grace that multiplies, between the freedom that his love offers and the bondage that unforgiveness creates, a bondage that enslaves. Jesus warns with divine authority, if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins, Matthew 6:15. A warning that echoes, if you seek his mercy, a mercy that covers, will you extend it to all, an extension that blesses? Also, imagine your life if you lived in mercy, a life that shines. Would you still nurse the grudges that poison, or would you release them into his hands? Hands that heal. Would you still judge with a heart hardened, or would you offer compassion as he did? A compassion that redeems. Would you still withhold the forgiveness that frees, or would you forgive as you have been forgiven? A forgiveness that lifts. The psalmist prays with a heart open. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love. Psalm 51:1, a prayer that pleads. If his mercy flows to you, a flow that sustains. Why does it stop with you, a stop that hinders? What would it mean to live with such forgiveness? A forgiveness that renews. Would you release the pain of past wrongs, wrongs that fade, trusting his justice to prevail? Would you surrender the right to judge, a right that binds, offering grace in his place? Would you walk with a heart lightened, a heart that forgives, proclaiming his love through every act, a love that endures? The prophet Micah calls, he has shown you, O mortal, what is good, to love mercy, Micah 6:8, a call to action. If he shows you mercy, why do you withhold it from others? This is but a deeper call to forgiveness, a call that draws you closer to his grace. Another question awaits, one that will call you to vigilance that lies within the depths of your spirit, a vigilance waiting to be awakened. Masa, are you still sleeping and resting? Imagine the scene, a garden called Gethsemane, the air heavy with the rich scent of olive trees and the tense aroma of impending betrayal, a scent that speaks of sacrifice and sorrow. Jesus kneels in prayer, his soul anguished as he faces the cup of suffering, a cup that trembles with the weight of the world, his sweat like drops of blood falling to the ground. The disciples, weary from the night, slumber nearby, their eyes closed to his agony, an agony that cries for companionship. Their bodies slumped in the shadow of the olive trees. He returns to them, his voice laden with sorrow that pierces the night. Are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come, Matthew 26:45, a question that shakes the stillness. In a stillness grips the garden, the night holding its breath, a breath that waits for awakening. This is no gentle reproach cast into the wind. It is a wake-up call, a question of readiness that reverberates with urgency, a call to stand, not slumber in the safety of ignorance, not rest in the comfort of unawareness, but vigilance in the face of trial, a trial that looms. Are you awake to his need, a nod that calls you to watch? Feel the weight of this divine moment, a moment that echoes through eternity. The air grows thick, the scent of olives mingling with the heaviness of destiny, a destiny that unfolds, drawing you into the urgency that pulses. Jesus rises, knowing the hour of betrayal is near, an hour that marks the cross, yet the disciples remain asleep, their slumber a contrast to his vigil. But now he turns to you, his gaze piercing the veil of your complacency. Are you still sleeping and resting? A sleep that blinds, do you drift through life, unaware of the spiritual battle that rages around you? A battle unseen as your soul alert to his call, a call that demands, or lulled by the comforts of the world. Comforts that deceive. Only your vigilance is your strength, a strength that guards your soul. If he calls you to watch, will you stay awake in prayer and faith? A faith that stands if he warns of the hour, an hour that approaches. Will you rise to meet it with readiness? A readiness that prepares the Apostle Peter urges with divine wisdom. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion. 1 Peter 5:8, a warning that awakens. Are you alert, a watchman on the walls? Or do you sleep while the enemy advances, an advance that threatens? Envision yourself before him now, in the quiet of this eternal encounter. His eyes, weary from the garden's vigil, a vigil that bled, search your spirit with a love that endures. His voice urgent yet loving, a voice that calls, are you still sleeping and resting? He asks, a question that demands your awakening, an awakening to his need. Your heart stirs with the weight of his words, your resolve tested by the fire of his gaze. Will you wake, standing guard in his name, a name that protects, or will you slumber, blind to the hour, an hour that demands? This question demands your attention, an attention that says so. It is the divide between slumber and service, a service that honors, between the apathy that weakens and the action that strengthens, an action that glorifies. Jesus teaches with divine authority, watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. Matthew 26:41, a teaching that guides. If you watch, will you pray with fervor, a fervor that sustains? Imagine your life if you stayed awake, a life that shines. Would you still drift through the days? Or would you stand firm in prayer, a prayer that uplifts? Would you still rest in the ease of ignorance? Or would you fight the good fight of faith, a fight that prevails? Would you still ignore the call that echoes? Or would you heed his voice to vigilance, a vigilance that guards the prophet Habakkuk, declares with steadfast resolve, I will stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. Habakkuk 2:1, a declaration that watches. If you stand, will you watch for his return, a return that promises? What would it mean to live with such vigilance, a vigilance that transforms? Would you release the slumber of complacency, a complacency that binds, trusting his strength to uphold you? Would you surrender the rest of distraction, a distraction that weakens, seeking his will alone? Would you walk with a heart alert, a heart that watches, proclaiming his name through every trial, a name that endures, the Apostle Paul calls? Devote yourselves to prayer, being watchful, Colossians 4:2. A call to awaken if he calls you to watch. Why do you sleep through the night? This is but a deeper call to vigilance, a call that draws you closer to his heart. The journey continues with more questions to guide your soul toward the eternal light, a call to transformation. We have journeyed through 7 new questions, each a lantern cast into the night, each a mirror reflecting the depths of your spirit with unerring truth. Do you believe I can do this? Summoned your faith to rise from the ashes of doubt, a rise that glorifies. If I want him to remain alive, what is that to you? Called you to obedience that frees from distraction, an obedience that honors. Do you love me more than these? Challenged your love to deepen beyond the temporal, a love that binds. Are you ready to drink the cup I drink? Tested your readiness to sacrifice for his name, a readiness that redeems. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant? Urged you to forgive with a heart of grace, a forgiveness that heals. Are you still sleeping and resting? Awakened you to vigilance that guards your soul, a vigilance that strengthens. Pause now and let these inquiries settle into the core of your being, a core that yearns for transformation. The scent of the shore, the garden, the temple, they linger like whispers of his presence. Each aroma a thread in the divine tapestry that weaves your story. The air thickens with a holy quiet, the distant chime of a celestial bell resonating through the silence, a chime that calls you to listen with your heart, a soft rustle of leaves like the wings of seraphim passing in the night, brushes against your skin, inviting you to feel his nearness, a nearness that comforts. The faint scent of frankincense rises, a breath of the eternal presence enveloping you, an envelope that sustains, a gentle warmth, like the glow of heavenly fire, wraps around your spirit, drawing you toward the divine throne, a throne that awaits. A faint vibration, like the heartbeat of creation itself, pulses beneath your feet, and a delicate fragrance of sacred balm lingers in the air, with a hint of divine peace and tender mercy that envelops your soul with celestial grace and everlasting hope, that lifts your spirit with divine strength and boundless compassion, that fills your heart with holy love and sacred tranquility, that renews your soul with eternal radiance and holy calm, that steadies your faith with divine rest and sacred harmony, that calms your spirit with eternal peace. His voice is not a distant memory lost to time, it echoes now, urging you to respond, a response that transforms. What will on with these questions that stir your soul? A soul that seeks, will you let them fade like a fleeting wind, lost to the noise of the world that distracts? Or will you allow them to reshape your spirit, forging a new path within you, a path that leads to light? Will you keep them at a distance? A thought to muse upon, but not embrace, an embrace that heals? Or will you let them pierce the depths of your heart, unveiling the truths you've buried beneath the surface? Truths that liberate, for as the prophet Jeremiah proclaims with divine assurance, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. Jeremiah 29-13, a promise that endures. Seeking demands an answer, a life transformed by his call, a call that renews. Search your soul with a heart open and willing, a heart that yearns. Which of these questions has stirred the silent depths within you, awakening long-dormant desires that sleep, which has caused you to pause, to see yourself anew in the light of his truth, a truth that reveals has. Do you believe I can do this? Ignited a spark of faith you thought lost, a spark that burns, has, if I want him to remain alive. What is that to you? Directed your focus to your own path, a path that guides. Do you love me more than these? Challenge the loves you hold dear, loves that fade, what hidden fear does. Are you ready to drink the cup I drink? Uncover a fear that binds, for Jesus desires not empty promises that fall, but a heart fully his, your faith that believes, your obedience that follows, your love that endures. The path stretches onward, glowing with questions yet to come, questions that draw you nearer. Will you advance with courage, a courage that rises, or retreat into the comfort of the known, a comfort that binds? The choice is yours, a choice that shapes. But know this, Jesus walks with you, his eyes upon your every step, a step that matters. his voice a constant call through the ages, a call that saves. What will your answer be now? An answer that defines, will you step into the transformation these questions promise? A promise that fulfills, or remain bound by the hesitations that hold you, hesitations that fade. Let us pause here, yet not for long, for the journey is far from its end, an end that awaits. The road ahead shines with the light of divine inquiry, a light that guides, drawing you closer to the heart of God. A heart that loves. Will you take the next step, embracing the change these words bring? A change that renews the stars above, bear witness to your decision. A decision that echoes. The wind waits in silence. A silence that listens, and the stillness holds its breath for your response. Its echo carrying the promise of eternal life for those who answer his voice. A voice that calls. Have you ever sensed a whisper in the void? A tremor that stirs the depths of your soul before a question rises from the silence. Its echo lingering like a sacred echo that never fades into oblivion. What if the questions of Jesus, veiled in divine mystery, hold the key to unlocking the eternal gates that guard the sanctuary of your spirit, a sanctuary yearning for light that pierces in the shadowed recesses of your heart, as you reach for a faint glimmer of heavenly light to pierce the enveloping darkness? Have you felt his presence probing you, his voice cutting through the night like a beacon of eternal fire that burns with unyielding strength? If the one who shaped the cosmos with a word of power chooses to ask, rather than command with authority that reigns, are you courageous enough to confront the truth he lays bare within your soul? A truth that trembles with eternal consequence and divine promise that endures. Imagine, in this very moment, a voice both tender and almighty resonating from the eternal abyss. Its tone a blend of mercy and majesty that calls with grace, will you answer me, O seeker of the divine truth, and embrace the path I set before you with a willing heart? Hearken now, for this is no tale spun by mortal hands, no fleeting story lost to the dust of time that passes like a shadow. This is a sacred pilgrimage through the untrodden wilderness of your spirit, where each question of Jesus ignites a holy flame to guide your weary steps toward the infinite light, a light that leads to the throne of glory. And a solemn wind sweeps across the desolate plateau, carrying the faint, sacred scent of ancient frankincense blended with the cool breath of dew-laden rock from a forgotten shrine. A fragrance that whispers of ages lost and promises fulfilled with divine purpose. You stand upon a craggy height, the ground beneath your feet solid yet quivering with a divine pulse, its texture evoking the hands that carved the mountains at the dawn of creation. Hands that now guide your soul with gentle strength and eternal care. Above, the sky unfolds into an endless canopy, stars pulsing with a celestial glow that seems to breathe with life, each a silent guardian bearing witness to the eternal questions that have shaped the destiny of humankind through the corridors of time with unwavering truth. The air grows dense with an unseen presence, a holy whisper that caresses your spirit like the touch of an angel's wing, calling your name with a question that reverberates through the core of your being, a call that demands an answer with urgency. Will you heed this divine summons, or will you shrink back into the shadows that entwine your fears? Shadows that seek to bind you with chains of doubt. What dwells within you? When the gaze of the Eternal One searches the hidden depths of your soul, peering into the secret places where your truest self resides in silence with hidden longing. This journey reaches its sacred climax at the altar, where faith is refined and destiny is forged in the fire of divine love. A place where the dross of your spirit is melted away to reveal the gold within, a gold that shines with his glory that never fades. Jesus, the Word made flesh, the light of the world that dispels all darkness. Pose 37 questions within the sacred scrolls, answering but 3 with a wisdom that transcends the ages with eternal depth. Why does the one who holds the universe in his hands, who spoke the worlds into being with a single breath of creation, choose to inquire, to draw forth the truths buried within the human heart like hidden treasures waiting to be found? The reason lies not in his need for knowledge, for he knows the thoughts of all with perfect understanding, but in your yearning for revelation. a yearning that seeks the light of His truth to illuminate your path with divine guidance. These questions are beacons cast into the night of your spirit, not to expose the facade you show the world, the mask you wear for others' approval with hollow praise, but to illuminate the secret heart you guard from its gaze, the heart where your true allegiance dwells in the silence of your soul. They are portals to eternity, standing open like ancient gateways carved by divine hands, inviting you to step across their threshold with the heart trembling yet hopeful, a hope that leads to His presence with unshaken faith. Let us delve into the final of these divine inquiries. Questions that probe the essence of your soul's readiness to stand before the throne of grace, a readiness that defines your eternity with everlasting promise. Will you also leave me? Envision the scene: a quiet hillside near Capernaum, where the air carries the earthy scent of sun-baked soil in the faint, warm whisper of bread shared among the crowd, a scent that speaks of provision and communion with divine love. Jesus has just spoken hard truths, declaring with unyielding clarity, "Unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink His blood, you have no life in you." John 6:53. Words that stir confusion and offense like a storm in the hearts of the listeners with troubled spirits. The disciples murmur among themselves, their faith wavering like a flame in the wind that threatens to extinguish. And many turn away, their footsteps fading into the distance, a distance that leads to separation from His light. Jesus turns to the 12, His voice soft yet piercing with a depth of sorrow and hope that resonates. "You do not want to leave too, do you?" John 6:67. A question that hangs in the air like a challenge that tests their hearts with divine intent. Peter, his heart stirred by the Spirit of truth, steps forward, his voice steady yet trembling with awe. "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life." John 6:68. A declaration that anchors his soul with unshaken resolve. A stillness envelops the hillside, the wind pausing as if to hear the answer with bated breath. A stillness that holds the breath of creation in suspense with holy expectation. This is no idle query cast into the void of emptiness. It is a test of allegiance, a moment where loyalty is weighed against the world's rejection, a rejection that fades into oblivion. Not the opinions of the crowd that shift like sand underfoot, not the ease of unbelief that tempts with false comfort, but the choice of your heart, a choice that defines your eternity. "Will you also leave me?" He asks, his voice a plea wrapped in divine authority, an authority that calls you home with a voice that saves. Feel the depth of this sacred encounter, a moment that reverberates through the corridors of time with eternal significance. The air grows heavy, the scent of soil and bread rising like an offering to the heavens, grounding you in the gravity of your decision. A decision that shapes your destiny with divine purpose. The disciples' resolve strengthens, their faith an anchor amid the storm of doubt that rages with human frailty, a storm that passes in His presence. Now He turns to you, His gaze piercing the veil of your thoughts, with a love that endures through all trials. "Will you also leave me?" A leaving that leads to loss of His light, when His words challenge the limits of your understanding with divine depth. When the world turns away with scornful eyes that judge, will you stand firm like a rock in the tide of adversity? Is your faith rooted in Him alone, a root that holds fast, or swayed by the shifting sands of human approval, sands that crumble under pressure? Your allegiance is your anchor, an anchor that steadies your soul. If you stay with Him in the face of trial, will you cling to His words as the source of life, a life that endures beyond the grave? Even when they confound your mind with their mystery, if you follow Him through the shadows, will you trust His truth over the world's wisdom? A wisdom that fades with time, a trust that saves your spirit. The psalmist declares with unshaken devotion, "My soul clings to you, your right hand upholds me." Psalm 63:8, a clinging that sustains through the storm. Do you cling to Him with a heart that holds firm? Or do you drift with the crowd, a crowd that wanders into darkness? Envision yourself before Him now, in the stillness of this eternal moment that never ends with time. His eyes, filled with a love that endured the cross's pain with grace, a love that never fails to redeem. Search your soul with a gaze that sees all with perfect clarity. Will you also leave me? He asks, his voice a tender call that pierces the silence with hope, a call that beckons you home. Your heart quakes with the weight of his question, your answer poised like a prayer on your lips with fervent desire. Will you stay, embracing his truth with a faith that endures through fire, a faith that shines with glory, or will you turn, following the path of ease that leads to shadows, shadows that fade in his light? This question tests your loyalty, a loyalty that defines your path. It is the divide between faith that stands unshaken and flight that falls into ruin, between the promise of eternal life that glows with radiance and the comfort of the temporal that dims with decay. Jesus promises with divine assurance, "My sheep listen to my voice, I know them, and they follow me," John chapter 10:27. A promise that guides your steps. If you listen to his voice with a heart that hears, will you follow him to the end? An end that leads to eternal glory with his presence. What would it mean to stay with him? A staying that transforms your soul. Would you release the fear of rejection that binds your spirit, trusting in his acceptance that frees you with grace? Would you surrender the worldly wisdom that deceives with falsehood, seeking his guidance that lights your way with truth? Would you walk boldly through the storms that rage, proclaiming his name with a voice that echoes through eternity, a name that endures beyond time? The prophet Isaiah assures with comforting words, "Those who hope in me will not be disappointed." Isaiah 49:23, a hope that strengthens your resolve. If you place your hope in him with a heart that trusts, why fear the act of leaving, a fear that fades in his love? What would it mean to live with such loyalty, a loyalty that renews your spirit? Would you let go of the need for human approval, an approval that shifts like sand, resting in his love that holds you fast with strength? Would you embrace the hard truths he speaks with divine clarity, truths that challenge your mind, trusting they lead to life that never ends? Would you stand as a beacon of light, a beacon that shines in the darkness, sharing his words with a world lost in shadow, a world that seeks? The Apostle Peter confesses with awe-inspired faith, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Matthew 16:16, a confession that anchors your soul. If you confess him with a voice that proclaims, why turn from his side with a heart that wavers? This is but the first of the final steps, a step that draws you closer to his heart with divine intimacy. Another question awaits, one that probes the understanding that lies within the depths of your spirit, an understanding waiting to be revealed with clarity. Do you understand what I have done for you? Imagine the scene in upper room during the Last Supper, the air thick with the solemn scent of wine poured out in sacrifice and the warm aroma of bread broken with love, a scent that speaks of covenant and redemption that flows. Jesus, having knelt to wash the disciples' feet with hands that humble, a humility that stuns the proud, turns to them with a question that pierces the silence with divine intent. Do you understand what I have done for you, John 13:12? A question that demands reflection with a heart open. The room falls silent. The act a lesson in service they struggle to grasp with human minds, a grasp that eludes their understanding. A hush settles over the room, the air charged with a sacred meaning that lingers with eternal weight, a weight that transforms. This is no casual inquiry cast into the wind of forgetfulness. It is a call to comprehend the depth of his sacrifice, a sacrifice that redeems with blood, not mere service rendered with human hands that tire, but the love that stoops to serve with divine grace, a love that bends to lift. Do you understand? He asks, his voice a teacher's plea that seeks your heart with compassion, a plea that teaches with wisdom. Feel the weight of this profound moment, a moment that echoes through eternity with divine truth that binds your soul. The air grows heavy, the scent of bread and wine rising like an incense offered to the heavens with reverence, drawing you into the lesson that unfolds with clarity, a lesson that transforms your life. Jesus explains with gentle authority that guides. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you, John 13:15. An example that calls to action with a voice that leads. Him. And now he turns to you, his gaze piercing the veil of your comprehension with a love that endures through all trials with strength. Do you understand what I have done for you? A doing that saves your soul. Do you see the love in his humility? A humility that washes away pride, the redemption in his service, a service that lifts you up. Will you follow his example in the life you live with a heart that serves, a life that reflects his grace? How your understanding leads to action, an action that glorifies his name. If you grasp the depth of his love, a love that gave all on the cross, will you serve others as he did with hands that heal? A service that blesses if you see the magnitude of his sacrifice, a sacrifice that bled for you. Will you live it out in your deeds with a spirit that shines? Deeds that redeem, the Apostle Paul writes, with divine wisdom that guides. In humility, value others above yourselves, Philippians 2:3. A wisdom that transforms. Do you value others with a heart that serves with joy? Or do you cling to pride that blinds with darkness? A pride that falls? Yeah, envision yourself before him now, in the stillness of this eternal moment that holds your destiny. His hands, still damp from the basin of service that humbles, a service that redeems, reach towards you with a grace that lifts. His eyes searching your soul with a gaze that sees all with perfect love. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asks. His voice a gentle call that stirs your heart with awakening. A call that renews. Your heart stirs with the weight of his question. Your spirit awakened by the depth of his love that flows. Will you serve? Reflecting his love that pours out with mercy. A love that transforms, or will you forget? Lost in the self that binds with chains, a self that fades. This question calls to comprehension, a comprehension that renews your spirit. It is the divide between knowledge that informs with light and obedience that lives with action, between receiving his gift that saves and giving it forth with grace, a giving that multiplies. Jesus teaches with divine command that shapes a new command I give you. Love one another, John 13:34. A command that leads if you understand his love with a heart that knows. Will you love as he loved with a love that sacrifices, a sacrifice that glorifies? What would it mean to live with this understanding? An understanding that transforms your days. Would you release the pride that exalts with vanity, trusting his humility to guide you with peace? Would you surrender the need for recognition that fades, seeking to serve in silence with a heart that gives? Would you walk with a heart that offers, a heart that lifts with joy, proclaiming his love through every act with a voice that endures? An act that shines, the prophet Micah guides with divine wisdom that directs. Act justly and love mercy and walk humbly with your God, Micah 8. A guidance that leads to life. If you know his mercy with a mind that grasps, why not walk in it with humility that blesses? What would it mean to embody this lesson? A lesson that renews your soul. Would you let go of the desire to be served with pride, a desire that binds, offering your hands to others with love? Would you embrace the call to wash feet with humility, a call that humbles your spirit, reflecting his grace in every step with grace? Would you live with a spirit of service, a spirit that glows with light, sharing his love with a world in need with a heart that cares? The Apostle John reflects with divine insight that inspires. We love because he first loved us, 1 John 4:19. A reflection that calls, if he served you with a heart that gives, why not serve others in return with a spirit that lifts? This is but a deeper call to understanding, a call that draws you closer to his heart with divine intimacy that binds. Another question awaits, one that challenges the faith that lies within the depths of your spirit, a faith waiting to be strengthened with divine power. Why are you troubled? And why do doubts rise in your minds? Picture the scene, a locked room after the resurrection, the air heavy with the scent of fear that lingers like a shadow in the faint, lingering aroma of spices from the tomb, a scent that speaks of death overcome with victory. Jesus appears among the disciples, his wounds visible like stars that shine, and with a voice of peace that calms, he says, "Why are you troubled? And why do doubts rise in your minds?" Luke 24:38. A question that pierces their fear with light. Their hearts leap with a mixture of joy that overflows and disbelief that clouds. torn between the miracle before them and the shadows of their past that haunt. A silence falls over the room, the air stilling with a sacred calm that holds with grace, a calm that soothes. This is no rebuke cast into the wind of judgment. It is a call to faith, a question that seeks to lift their spirits with hope, a lift that redeems with love. Not fear that binds with chains, not doubt that clouds with darkness, but trust in his risen power, a power that conquers the grave. Why are you troubled, he asks, his voice a balm that heals with peace, a balm that restores. Feel the weight of this divine moment, a moment that echoes through the ages with eternal truth that saves. The air grows thick, the scent of spices rising like a testimony to his victory that shines, grounding you in their struggle with a struggle that fades. Jesus shows his hands and feet, proof of his triumph over death with grace, a triumph that glows. And now he turns to you, his gaze piercing the veil of your fears with a love that endures through all storms with strength. Why are you troubled, and why do doubts rise in your minds? Minds that wander in shadow. Do the fears and uncertainties that cloud your days with gloom dim your faith in his promises? Promises that hold with certainty. Will you trust in the power of his resurrection? A power that raises you up, to still the storms within your soul with peace. Your faith dispels doubt, a doubt that weakens your spirit. If you believe that he lives with a life that endures, will you cast out the fear that haunts your nights, a fear that fades in his light? If you trust in the word he speaks with authority, a word that stands, will you stand firm against the tides that threaten your peace, tides that pass, the Apostle Thomas? Once doubting with a heart that questioned, confesses with awe that transforms. My Lord and my God, John 20:28, a confession that saves. Do you confess with a heart that believes with conviction? Or do you doubt with a mind that wavers in uncertainty? Honestly, envision yourself before him now, in the stillness of this eternal moment that never ends with time's flow. His wounds, signs of triumph that glow with glory, face you with a grace that redeems your soul. His hands extended as proof of his victory that conquers. Why are you troubled? And why do doubts rise in your minds, he asks. His voice a reassuring call that lifts your spirit, a call that strengthens with hope. Your heart lifts with the promise of his peace that flows. Your faith tested by the light of his presence that shines. Will you trust, embracing the peace that calms your soul, a peace that endures, or will you waver, held by the fear that binds your heart, a fear that dims in his light? This question strengthens your faith, a faith that endures through trials. It is the divide between doubt that falters with weakness and belief that stands with strength, between the fear that darkens your path and the peace that lights your way, a peace that saves with grace. Jesus promises with divine comfort that soothes. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you, John 14:27, a promise that holds fast. If you have his peace with a heart that receives, why do you doubt with a mind that questions, a doubt that fades? What would it mean to live with this faith, a faith that transforms your life? Would you release the fear of death that shadows your steps, trusting in the life he offers with abundance? Would you surrender the uncertainties that plague your nights? Resting in his promises that endure with certainty, would you walk with a heart at peace that glows? Proclaiming his resurrection with every breath that lives, a breath that sings the prophet Isaiah comforts with divine assurance that uplifts. Fear not, for I am with you, be not dismayed, for I am your God, Isaiah 41:10. A comfort that sustains. If he is with you with a presence that never leaves, why be troubled by the night that passes? What would it mean to stand in this trust? A trust that renews your spirit. Would you let go of the doubts that bind your mind when blind, a binding that weaken? Embracing his truth that frees your soul, would you rise above the fears that haunt your days, a haunting that fades, seeking his strength that upholds you with power? Would you live with a spirit unshaken that shines, sharing his peace with a world in turmoil? With a heart that gives, the Apostle Paul encourages with divine hope that lifts. Be joyful always. Pray continually, the Thessalonians 1:5, 16, 17. an encouragement that renews. If he gives you joy with a gift that overflows, why let doubts rise with a heart that falters? This is but a deeper call to faith, a call that draws you closer to his victories with divine triumph. Another question awaits, one that invites the witness that lies within the depths of your spirit, a witness waiting to be shared with the world. Have you anything here to eat? Imagine the scene, the same locked room after the resurrection. The air now light with the scent of hope that rises like a dawn in the faint. Lingering aroma of a shared meal that speaks of life restored with joy. Jesus, risen in glory that shines, stands among the disciples with a presence that fills, his form a miracle of grace, and with a voice of gentle inquiry that invites, he asks, "Have you anything here to eat?" Luke 24:41. A question that seeks to prove his physical reality with truth. They offer him a piece of broiled fish with trembling hands, and he eats with a calm that confirming his bodily triumph over death with a triumph that glows. A calm settles over the room, the air warming with a sacred peace that holds with love, a peace that comforts. This is no idle request cast into the void of doubt. It is a call to witness his reality, a reality that endures beyond the grave. Not a ghost that fades with the night, not a vision that dissolves with the dawn, but the living Christ who walks among them with life, a Christ that reigns. "Have you anything?" he asks, his voice inviting them to see with eyes that believe, an invitation that opens their hearts. And feel the weight of this divine moment, a moment that reverberates with eternal joy that overflows. The air grows thick, the scent of fish rising like a testimony to his victory that shines with glory. Drawing you into their joy with a joy that lifts, Jesus eats with a peace that calms, a sign of his bodily triumph over the grave with grace, a sign that confirms his power. And now he turns to you, his gaze piercing the veil of your belief with a love that conquers all fear with strength. Have you anything here to eat? A question that calls with purpose. Will you offer your life as a witness to his resurrection? A witness that shines with light. Can you share his living presence with a world that seeks with longing? A sharing that saves with grace. Your witness feeds others, a feeding that nourishes their souls. If you believe that he lives with a life that endures, will you share that truth with a voice that proclaims with boldness? A voice that lifts if you see the power of his resurrection, a power that raises the dead. Will you testify with a heart that burns with fire, a heart that glows? The Apostle John writes, with divine testimony that unites. We proclaim to you what we have seen and heard, so that you also may have fellowship with us. 1 John 1:3. A proclamation that binds. Do you proclaim with a spirit that shares with joy? Or do you hide with a silence that dims with shadow? A silence that fades. Envision yourself before him now, in the stillness of this eternal moment that holds your destiny. His hands, holding the fish as a sign of life that thrives. Reach out to you with a grace that redeems your soul. His eyes filled with a joy that overcomes all darkness with light. Have you anything here to eat? He asks. His voice a call to witness that stirs your heart with purpose. A call that awakens your spirit. Your heart stirs with the weight of his invitation. Your witness tested by the light of his presence that shines with glory. Will you offer, sharing his life with a world in need, with a need that cries, a sharing that fulfills, or will you withhold? Silent in the face of his glory, with a silence that binds, a glory that endures. This question demands your testimony, a testimony that saves with grace. It is the divide between belief that holds in secret and sharing that spreads with light, between seeing his power with eyes that see and telling his story with a voice that speaks, a story that endures through time. Jesus commands with divine authority that guides. Go and make disciples of all nations, Matthew 28:19, a command that calls you forth. If you have seen his resurrection with a heart that believes, will you go with a spirit that obeys with devotion, a spirit that fulfills his will? What would it mean to live as a witness that transforms your world? Would you release the fear of speaking that binds your tongue, a fear that fades, trusting his strength to uphold you with power? Would you surrender the silence that hides your faith, a silence that weakens, seeking to proclaim his name with a voice that resounds? Would you walk with a heart that testifies, a heart that glows with light, sharing his love with every step that leads? A step that saves, the prophet Jeremiah urges, with divine passion that ignites. Sing to the Lord, for he has done marvelous things. Jeremiah 31:7, a urging that sings with joy. If he has done marvels with a hand that creates, why not testify with a heart that rejoices with praise? What would it mean to share this witness? A witness that renews your spirit. Would you let go of the shame that silences your voice? A shame that dims, embracing his victory that frees your soul with grace? Would you rise above the doubt that holds your heart? A doubt that fades, offering his truth to all with a spirit that shines? Would you live with a spirit that proclaims, a spirit that glows with radiance, spreading his light to the ends of the earth with a light that endures? The Apostle Paul encourages with divine hope that lifts. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you, Peter 3:15. An encouragement that prepares your heart. If he lives with a life that triumphs, why not share his life with a voice that speaks? This is but a deeper call to witness, a call that draws you closer to his resurrection with divine glory. Another question awaits, one that seals the love that lies within the depths of your heart. A love waiting to be lived with a heart that gives. Do you love one another as I have loved you? Picture the scene, the upper room again during the Last Supper. The air filled with a rich scent of love poured out with sacrifice and the solemn aroma of redemption fulfilled with grace. A scent that speaks of covenant and eternal promise. Jesus, having washed the disciples' feet with hands that would soon be nailed to the cross. A humility that stuns the proud with awe. Commands with a voice of authority and love that resonates. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another, John 13:34. A command that echoes through time. Then, implicitly, he asks with a heart that searches, do you love one another as I have loved you? A question that pierces the depths of your soul with the call to action. The room holds the weight of his sacrifice, a sacrifice that defines your faith with blood. A peace settles over the room, the air sacred with a stillness that holds with love, a stillness that comforts. This is no suggestion cast into the wind of indifference. It is a call to embody his love, a love that redeems with grace. Not the human love that fades with time, but his sacrificial love that gave all on the cross. A love that endures beyond the grave. Do you love? He asks. His voice a command that shapes your heart, a command that calls you to serve. Feel the weight of this divine moment, a moment that reverberates with eternal truth that binds your spirit. The air grows thick, the scent of bread and wine lingering like an offering with reverence, drawing you into his love, a love that transforms your life. Jesus' love led him to the cross with a heart that bled, a model for all to follow with devotion, a model that guides your steps. And now he turns to you, his gaze piercing the veil of your actions with a love that conquers all darkness with light. Do you love one another as I have loved you? A love that sacrifices with grace? Do you give selflessly? As he did on the cross with a heart that gives, a giving that redeems, will you live his love daily? A love that endures through trials. In the life you lead with a spirit that shines. Often your love reflects his, a reflection that glows with radiance. If he loved you to the point of death with a love that saves, will you love sacrificially with a heart that gives with joy? A giving that blesses. If he gave all for you with a sacrifice that redeems, will you give to others with hands that serve with compassion? A service that lifts. The Apostle John teaches with divine insight that inspires. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, John 3:16. A teaching that defines your path. Do you lay down your life with the spirit that loves with depth? Or do you hold back with a heart that withholds with selfishness? A withholding that dims. Envision yourself before him now, in the stillness of this eternal moment that holds your destiny with promise. His cross, a sign of love that glows with glory, stands before you with a grace that redeems your soul. His hands extended as proof of his sacrifice that saves. Do you love one another as I have loved you? He asks, his voice a challenge that stirs your heart with purpose, a challenge that calls you to action. Your heart opens with the weight of his command, your love tested by the fire of his example that burns. Will you love? Following his example with a love that flows with mercy, a love that transforms, or will you withhold? Living for self with a love that fades with time, a fading that binds. This question defines your mission, a mission that saves with grace. It is the divide between self-love that blinds your eyes and divine love that frees your spirit, between receiving his gift that heals and giving it forth with a heart that multiplies, a giving that blesses. Jesus prays with divine longing that unites, that all of them may be one. Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. John 17:21, a prayer that binds your soul. If you are one with him with a heart that joins, will you love as he did with a love that binds, a love that endures? What would it mean to live with this love, a love that transforms your days? Would you release the judgment that hardens your heart, trusting his mercy to guide you with peace? Would you surrender the hoarding that binds your hands, offering your all to others with a spirit that gives? Would you walk with a heart that embraces all, a heart that shines with light, proclaiming his love with every act that endures, an act that glows? The prophet Hosea calls with divine passion that pleads, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, an acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings. Hosea 6:6, a call that seeks. If he desires mercy with a heart that loves, why not love with a spirit that gives with grace? What would it mean to embody this command? A command that renews your soul. Would you let go of the hate that divides your path, a hate that fades, embracing his love that unites your spirit? Would you rise above the indifference that blinds your eyes, an indifference that weakens, seeking to serve with compassion that heals? Would you live with a spirit that loves with depth, a spirit that glows with radiance, sharing his grace with a world in need with a heart that cares? The Apostle Paul encourages with divine hope that lifts. Love must be sincere, be devoted to one another, Romans 12:9-10, an encouragement that renews. If he loves sincerely with a love that saves, why not love as he did with a heart that serves? And this is the final call to love, a call that draws you closer to his heart, a heart that beats for you with eternal rhythm. The journey nears its end, a call to eternal unity that binds your soul to his with unbreakable love. But also a call to eternal unity. We have traversed 7 final questions, each a beacon piercing the night with unyielding light that guides, each a mirror reflecting the depths of your spirit with divine truth that reveals your path. Will you also leave me tested your loyalty to his word, a word that saves with grace? Do you understand what I have done for you, called you to comprehend his service, a service that redeems with love? Why are you troubled? And why do doubts rise in your minds? Challenged your faith to rise above the storm with strength, a faith that endures. Have you anything here to eat? Invited you to witness his resurrection, a witness that shines with glory. Do you love one another as I have loved you? Urged you to live his love, a love that transforms with mercy. Pause now and let these inquiries sink into the core of your being. A core that yearns for unity with his heart that loves. The scent of the hillside, the upper room, the garden, they linger like whispers of his presence. Each aroma, a thread in the divine tapestry that weaves your story with his, with eternal care. The air thickens with a holy quiet, the distant chime of a celestial harp, resonating through the silence with a sound that calls, a sound that invites you to listen with a heart that hears. A soft rustle of leaves, like the wings of seraphim passing in the glory of heaven, with divine majesty, brushes against your skin, inviting you to feel his nearness with a touch that comforts, a touch that soothes. The faint scent of frankincense rises, a breath of the eternal presence enveloping you with a grace that sustains with strength, a grace that holds you fast, a gentle warmth, like the glow of heavenly fire that never fades with time, wraps around your spirit, drawing you toward the divine throne with a pull that leads, a throne that awaits your arrival with joy, a faint vibration, like the heartbeat of creation itself with a rhythm that lives, pulses beneath your feet with a pulse that throbs, and a delicate fragrance of sacred balm lingers in the air with a hint of divine peace and tender mercy that envelops your soul with celestial grace and everlasting hope, that lifts your spirit with divine strength and boundless compassion, that fills your heart and with holy love and sacred tranquility, that renews your soul with eternal radiance and holy calm, that steadies your faith with a divine rest and sacred harmony, that calms your spirit with eternal peace and divine unity, that binds you to Him with everlasting love and sacred joy that completes your journey. His voice is not a distant memory lost to the ages. With forgetfulness, it echoes now, urging you to respond with a heart that answers with devotion, a response that transforms your life. What will you do with these questions that stir your soul, a soul that seeks His face with longing? Will you let them fade like a fleeting wind, lost to the noise of the world that distracts with its clamor and confusion? Or will you allow them to reshape your spirit, forging a new path within you with a path that leads to His light that never dims with shadow? Will you keep them at a distance, a thought to muse upon, but not embrace with your all with a heart that holds, an embrace that heals with grace? Or will you let them pierce the depths of your heart, unveiling the truths you have buried beneath the surface of your life with hidden fears, truths that liberate with His love? For as the prophet Jeremiah proclaims, with divine assurance that endures, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart, Jeremiah 29:13. A promise that stands through the ages with strength. Seeking demands an answer, a life transformed by His call, a call that renews your spirit with His presence that guides. Insert your soul with a heart open and willing, a heart that yearns for His touch with desire. Which of these questions has stirred the silent depths within you, awakening long-dormant desires that sleep in the night with stillness, which has caused you to pause, to see yourself anew in the light of His truth, a truth that reveals your destiny with clarity? As will you also leave me strengthened your resolve to stand with Him, with a resolve that holds fast, a resolve that shines? Do you understand what I have done for you? Deepen your service to others with a service that glows, a service that lifts. Do you love one another as I have loved you? Challenge the loves you hold dear with a challenge that purifies. Loves that fade in His presence, for Jesus desires not empty promises that fall like leaves in the wind, but a heart fully His, your faith that believes with conviction that saves, your obedience that follows with devotion that honors, your love that endures with sacrifice that glorifies. Yeshua, the path of this journey nears its end, glowing with the radiant presence of His love, a love that draws you ever nearer with a pull that binds. Will you advance with the courage that rises from within, a courage that overcomes all fear, or retreat into the comfort of the known, a comfort that binds you to the past with chains? The choice is yours, a choice that shapes your eternity with divine purpose. But know this: Jesus walks with you, His eyes upon your every step, with a course that guides your way, His voice a constant call through the ages, with a call that saves your soul. What will your answer be now? An answer that defines your heart with truth. Will you step into the transformation these questions promise? A promise that fulfills your destiny with glory? Or remain bound by the hesitations that hold you back with doubt? Hesitations that fade in His light with grace. Let us pause here, yet not for long, for the journey is nearing its close, a close that opens to eternity with hope. The road ahead shines with the light of divine inquiry, a light that leads you home, drawing you closer to the heart of God, a heart that beats for you with love. Will you take the next step, embracing the change these words bring, with a change that renews your spirit with peace? The stars above bear witness to your decision, a decision that echoes through the heavens with joy. The wind waits in silence, with a silence that listens with care, and the stillness holds its breath for your response, its echo carrying the promise of eternal life for those who answer His voice, a voice that calls you home with everlasting love and divine joy that completes your journey with fulfillment.